Have you ever picked up multiple romance or fantasy novels and wondered why you absolutely devoured one, but you hated the other, even though they have supposedly similar elements within the book? Then you might want to watch this video on the differences between romantic fantasy, fantasy romance, and romantasy. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Amanda if you're new here, and this channel is all about my journey towards publication. I'm on a 6-month challenge to motivate myself and goal myself to become a full-time indie author by the beginning of 2026. If you are interested in following me for that journey, go ahead and hit subscribe below. I post videos once a week updating you guys on what I'm doing and other writing technique and things like that. For this video, I want to talk to you guys about the differences between romantasy, romantic fantasy, and fantasy romance. This was a requested video from another author tuber and also fellow writer. I'll put their profile page somewhere over here for you guys so that you can check out their page later. They requested that I make this video explaining a bit more about the differences between these sub-genres within the overarching romance genre. To start things off, let's cover the similarities between all three sub-genres because that's quick, it's easy, it's also necessary if we're going to distinguish the differences between these sub-genres later. So romantic fantasy, fantasy romance, and romantasy are all three sub-genres within the romance genre. And amongst these three subcategories, there are similarities that they all share, mainly being 2 plot lines, 1 romance, and 1 an actionable plot line, or a mystery or a thriller. And also similar themes in that case of maybe survival and love. That you can determine the difference between these is based on which plot line is going to be the main plot or the subplot within the category itself or within the novel that you're writing. And the way that we can determine that is based on the ratio of romance to action within each of the categories or the novels that you're reading within the categories. And if you have more romance, less action, you are looking for fantasy romance. More action, less romance, you're looking for romantic fantasy. And if you have an equal amount of both action and romance within the novel, you are looking for romantasy. Within the ratios of the sub-genres, you can also expect to find different elements based on the ratios. We have romantic fantasy, we have fantasy romance, and we have romantasy. All three of these are going to contain romance, but all three of these are going to contain different levels of romantic elements within the novel and romantic focus. Romantic fantasy is probably the closest sub-genre to true fantasy with a romantic subplot as its secondary plot. The romantic subplot just supports the action plot. With romantic fantasy, the themes are usually darker. So the idea and the concept, the message within the book that is imposed by the author onto the reader, those themes are usually darker in concept than you would find in the other two subgenres. Themes like survival and war and political games. So for romantic fantasy, a really good example that I can showcase to you guys is going to be Daughter of No Worlds by Clarissa Broadbent. If you have read this book already, you probably will recognize some of the romantic fantasy elements within the novel as you read through. It is very much less so romance, and it's more so containing fantasy elements like world building, political sabotage, and darker themes of survival within the novel. And there's more of a focus on the systems within the world that the author has created, especially the magic systems. Second is going to be fantasy romance. It has a higher ratio of romance as the main plot, and action is the secondary plot line, so a lower containment of action within the novel. There's more emotion, there's more concern for the character connections between characters, found family, other elements that take a softer approach to the fantasy items that you might have been looking for with romantic fantasy. So world building is there, politics can still occur, but it's not the same degree of depth that you get to see in fantasy romance as you would with romantic fantasy. So the themes for fantasy romance is normally tied to the romance plotline as the dominant plotline. And so it would more than likely revolve around a theme of love or loss or connection of some sort between the characters. For fantasy romance, the example I can give you guys is going to be Ice Planet Barbarians novel by Ruby Dixon. And yes, this is a sci-fi fantasy romance, but if you take the sci-fi elements out, it's literally just fantasy romance. It works the exact same way. Throughout the novel, you are getting a focus on the romance between the two main characters. You're getting less action. The action is more central to a singular either setting or singular fantasy element, which in this case is the Ice Planet Barbarians camp that they live within. So we're getting to see smaller elements of the actual world itself, smaller fantasy elements for the world building. We get some culture and backstory and things like that, but the overarching feeling within the progression of the novel is focused on the emotions of the two characters as they come together in this romance. And you get to see found family, you get to see survival on a smaller scale, but mostly the romance and spicy scenes. So Romantasy then is the amalgamation of the two. It's the happy middle medium point. It is containing both romance and action plot lines, but instead of having one as a main plot line and one as a subplot line, you actually have two dominant plot lines. Both romance and the action plot line are your main plot lines. This is why Romantasy is so difficult to write, because you have two dominant plot lines that you have to work with throughout the novel. And so what happens with a Romantasy is that you may start with one and weave in the second, but they usually take a rotation throughout the novel. And in some scenes, you may see a little bit more romance, and then you may see in other scenes a little more action. If a writer can write Romantasy really well, often they balance the two within every scene and in every chapter. And with Romantasy, being that you have two dominant plot lines, if you remove one of the two plot lines, the other would not work at all. They work cohesively together as a unit, and they rely on each other. The best example that I can give of Romantasy is ACOTAR. You guys have probably read this novel. If you haven't already, I highly suggest it. The reason that ACOTAR is aligned well with the Romantasy subgenre is for the fact that there is both a actionable plotline and a strong romance plotline, and the author goes back and forth between these two plotlines based on the scenes that are occurring within the novel. And you can take the inciting incident of this book, and if you removed the romantic portion, this character would not survive. If you remove the actionable portion, the romance would not survive. And that is how you know you have Romantasy. If you have read ACOTAR, you can more than likely tell some of the Romantasy elements that are within the novel. There is lots of political intrigue, there's lots of interesting magic systems, and lots of world building elements, but there's also an equal and balanced amount of romance within the book itself. If you know as a reader what you are looking to read, you feel in your little reader soul that you want more romance today, you would probably want to find a fantasy romance. If you are feeling that you want to see more interesting magical systems and worlds that other people have created, you might be leaning more romantic fantasy. And if you're just kind of feeling like, I want action and struggle to survive, and I want romance at the same time and heartbreak, you might want Romantasy in that case when you are going to the bookstore to pick up a new book. And same for writers. Now that we have a key area of difference between all three of these subgenres, you can now identify within your own work if you are missing elements that would help better clarify to your reader which way your book should be marketed. And in this instance, reader expectation is one of the reasons why some writers, when they have a reader read their work and they're given feedback that they dislike the work, or it's not what they expected, there wasn't enough romance, there was too much action, or vice versa, there was too much action, not enough romance. This can occur when you aren't meeting your reader expectations because the elements within your work are not containing enough of what they would expect within these subgenres as a reader. And that's part of the issue with understanding these differences as writers, but also as readers, so that everyone can be happy at the end of the day. And we aren't buying books that aren't containing the things we're looking for. And we as authors and writers are not writing books that aren't containing the things that we're marketing our book as to our readers. This becomes really apparent between editors and publishers because they have more of a defining definition as to what romantasy is, romantic fantasy, and fantasy romance. But with all things, even definitions, things change. For example, romantasy was a sub-genre of romance and fantasy for a very long time. And then all of a sudden, it feels like romantasy is now the number one genre. Over time, our definition and understanding of what is fantasy, what is romantasy, what is fantasy romance, what's romantic fantasy, changes because of these elements that continue to grow or adjust. As people look at things differently, they understand things differently. The culture changes with every generation. In that instance, that's kind of where it's important because we as people have a social responsibility to continue defining what these things mean in order to have clearer guidance for everyone involved. I think once you see the differences within your own work or within books that you're reading, you won't be able to unsee it in that case. And the line between these are blurry, but there's some defining moments. As a fellow reader, I hope this helped give you some clarity around what types of books you might be more interested in terms of the subgenre, and how you can better identify what you're looking for at the bookstore if you know which subgenre contains more of the ratio that you are looking for. More romance or more action, or somewhere in the middle in between with a good balance. That would let you align closer to your expectations as a reader around what you're looking to see unveil within the book, what types of tropes you're wanting to have. That is all dependent upon the ratio, romance versus action, and what subcategory fits closer to what you want. That's all for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you're interested in seeing more, don't forget to subscribe. Leave me a comment below if you have found yourself in a similar situation in which you picked up a book marketed as one subcategory, but then when you read it, you were just totally thrown off by the fact that it didn't fit what you were looking for. There wasn't enough romance, or there wasn't enough action, or it just wasn't well done. Like, that happens too. Want to stay up to date with everything that I'm doing on this channel? Please subscribe. It does help me out a lot. If you have any other questions that I can answer for you around this topic, also list that below. I'd love to also know. And other than that, I will see you guys in the next video. Go ahead and check out the last video that I had shared to this channel if you're interested. It may be something that you also want to see.